As you might know, Half-Life got an update and ended up having the multiplayer component of the game revitalized. Naturally, as an arena-style shooter enthusiast, I had to check it out, and guess what? It's fun. Really fun. The gameplay is incredibly fast, the movement is satisfying, and the maps are also amazing with your own unique quirks and interactive elements. But the best part of the game is easily the weapons. Of course, you have your classics like the Magnum and Shotgun, but you also have some really unique weapons like the rocket launcher, Tau cannon, Blood gun, and the Starks. And this is a game made in 1998. Imagine how much weapon design sci-fi FPS games have evolved, and space AKs. How did we get here? How did we go from some of the coolest weapons in fiction to a futuristic skin of a contemporary weapon? First, let's delve deeper into why these modern weapons are so lame. The most egregious example of games squandering their potential for cool weapons is Valorant. Look at everything else in the world, all the crazy superpowers and technology that makes the game an absolute mess to look at, which is expected for a hero shooter. Now look at these guns. Sure, you make them a dragon or a robot from the future or whatever wacky stuff due to how the skins are designed in this game. But in the end, they have the same boring function. Weapon we currently have, but futuristic. Kind of. Granted, I have to give some points for the alt-fires of the classic and Bucky, but those are drops in the bucket compared to the sheer disappointment that everything else has. And yes, I know, it's supposed to be a competitive shooter and a CS clone, but that doesn't really change anything. If you take me into a fancy-looking restaurant with this strict dress code, I'm going to expect a 5-star meal and not a Big Mac. Alright, that was an easy target. Everyone knows that Valorant is bad. How about a more respected game like Titanfall, and subsequently Apex? The universe the game occupies is full of cool stuff like time travel and G-stars and Titans, more space ups. There are also some projectile weapons, but that's really it. Are you beginning to see a pattern here? A lot of sci-fi games refuse to capitalize underworld and decide to go with boring reskins of weapons we already have. The main exception to this is Overwatch, but it's Overwatch. Nobody should be subjected to this game. Welp, we filled our quota about complaining about modern gaming. Now it's time to show that, yes, you can go beyond the bare minimum in weapon design. Exhibit A, Half-Life. One of Half-Life's best features is how many weapons you can have on you at once. But this also means you need to make sure that every weapon has a purpose in both campaign and multiplayer. Thankfully, Valve managed to balance this well, with just about every weapon having a niche, or a not-so-niche use scenario. But we're not here to discuss balance, we're here to see the cool stuff. First, we have the Hive Hand, a weapon that's on the weaker side but has two special properties. One, it tracks the enemy even around corners, making it a good tool for chip damage. The second property, unlimited ammo and automatic reloading. You can easily use this weapon and put it back for some free damage. It just reloads like nothing ever happened. Next up, we have the Tau cannon. Or that's either a basic fast-firing beam that does 20 damage per shot, or you can charge up to fire a devastating laser that erases everything that comes in its path. It has such heavy recoil, it can launch you across the map. Also, it bounces off walls, so if you like the Halo 3 sniper, you'll feel right at home with this weapon. The glue-on gun is a lightning gun, but it just has way cooler presentation. It also shares ammo with the Tau can, so choose your gun, I guess. These are all great weapons that play off the world they were made in, and this is only for the first game, as Valve manages to top this all off by replacing all the sci-fi weapons with two new ones. Alright, the Combine Rifle is okay, as the bouncing ball of death gimmick is pretty interesting, but the second one is going to be downright defiant if I'm going to accept losing all that we had. Thankfully, the weapon in question is a gravity gun. It's a weapon that can solve puzzles, create cover, pull health over to you, and you can use nearly any object in the game as a weapon. You can just kill someone by throwing bricks at them repeatedly. Or you just slam it in the head with a filing cabinet. Words alone cannot do it justice. Just go out there, play some Half-Life 2, mess around with the gravity gun a bunch. It'll be fun. However, there's another sci-fi shooter that's been consistently a benchmark for creating unique and creative weapons in the FPS genre, which is none other than Halo. Halo has a ton of iconic weapons, with most of them being from the enemy, the Covenant. Because if you're fighting alien forces, they're probably going to use alien weaponry. Starting off, we have the Plasma Pistol, a dinky looking weapon that goes from harmless to devastating when you add the charge attack into the equation. Unless you're playing the campaign, that just does more damage than it has any right to do. This thing just straight up carried my legendary run. Next, we have the Plasma Rifle, which is a basic laser weapon that becomes more interesting with the stun effect added, as enemies hit by it will be slowed down significantly. Unfortunately, this was removed from every other Halo for balance reasons, I guess. Speaking of issues with balance, the Needler. It's easily the most iconic weapon from Combat Evolved, and for good reason. Its gimmick is that it fires multiple needles at home onto enemies, and once enough of them stick on, they explode. It may be useless in multiplayer, but still a nice option for taking down elites in the campaign. They also buffed it in later games, so it's more than a meme weapon, and that's quite nice. And this is just the first game, as Halo has continually introduced unique weapons in every game, except for 4 and 5. We don't talk about those. Halo 2 introduces the Energy Sword and Fuel Rod cannon, one of which is the most iconic weapon in the entire franchise, and offers a weapon that bounces. I don't know who would make a weapon that bounces, but it's still a unique addition to the sandbox. Halo 3 is the Gravity Hammer, another amazing melee weapon that fully plays into the physics-based nature of Halo, allowing you to launch anything unfortunate enough to get in your path, including rockets if you're good enough. If you want a more futuristic human weapon for once, the Spartan laser might be for you, as who doesn't love a massive laser that demolishes even tanks? Reach had the plasma launcher, which can charge up multiple homing plasma grenades, and the grenade launcher for the humans that could be held for longer that can EMP buildings. Even 343 eventually got developed as shock weapons in Halo Infinite, which are a unique weapon class that can EMP vehicles and can chain off metallic objects. I could continue talking about every unique and cool weapon Halo made, or more unique weapons in other FPS games for that matter, but we would be here for way too long, so let's get back to the topic at hand. What happened? Why don't we get weapons like this anymore? There are a few reasons for this. The first main reason for this is market pressure and risk aversion. Games are made to make money at the end of the day, and companies want their products to sell to as many people as possible. And people like familiar things, familiar genres, and familiar weapons, like, say, an AK-47. So instead of taking any risk with your sci-fi FPS game, you decide to just go for the safest option and risk in a modern weapon. Again, Valorant is the clearest offender of this, as the entire game can be said to be built on previous market trends and research, everything from copying the work of CS to adding ADS to a game that doesn't really need it. This also applies to Titanfall, which could also be attributed to the developers just making what they knew what to make, as they previously made the first 2 Modern Warfare games. It would also explain the unnecessary addition of ADS and Sprint, but that's another topic for another time. Speaking of ADS, that's another reason we don't really get that many unique weapons. The game's design doesn't really allow for it. A lot of these games with unique weapon types like Half-Life, Halo, Team Fortress 2, and Overwatch all have one thing in common. You can move at top speed while shooting accurately. This gives you a lot more leeway for the weapons you can make, as projectile-based weapons are hard to design in games where you must stand still to be accurate. If Half-Life required you to slow down to become accurate, like say, if it became a military game where you had to slow down completely, and there was more grenades, and there was no respawns, and you had to buy your weapons, no, that's just a wacky concept for a game. Who would make that? The rocket launcher and Talcat would become almost completely irrelevant because the magnet would be the better choice in almost every situation. Why take time to one-shot the enemy when you can just instantly click on their head? This also applies to the equivalent of the lightning gun in Valorant, as not only does the movement accuracy get balanced out by the fact that enemies can just one-tap you, but it's also an ultimate ability, showing how many compromises need to be made to have these weapons in the game. That leads to the final reason why creative weaponry isn't really a priority in these games. It's hard to make cool weapons. It isn't a utility where you can just limit the usage as merely a side tool. When talking about weapons, it needs to be carefully designed, as the weapon will always be a factor when out. If you mess it up, congratulations, you just made the sandbox worse with no real way to easily rework it. There's also just coming up with the idea for a new weapon, which can be difficult, saying that you can't just copy and paste a creative weapon in the same way you could with a special utility or a hero ability. This is why we have all these games with these crazy utilities, but they just have realistic weapons sitting around. Now, so you may be asking a question. Why the heck does it even matter at all? If we already have the cool stuff, why does it matter if the weapons are lame? The reason this matters so much is that we're missing an entire avenue of further advancing the gameplay. Sure, while utility can be great, it's not a first-person shooter if there's nothing to shoot your opponent with. While we've been evolving various forms of utility, the gunplay aspect has been largely ignored and still holds a lot of potential. There's also the factor of standing out from the crowd, as having a ton of cool stuff will draw people to your game. It's the reason Ultra Kill is blown up, as it's easy to advertise your game by showing people that there's a gun that fires coins to be used for combos. Another AK blends in, while a flamethrower with a reflector attached is interesting. Main point is, people want to use interesting tools. While utility is usually temporary, the weapon will always be at your side. After all, if every form of technology in a sci-fi setting has evolved, why shouldn't the weapons? It's how the FPS genre actually evolves instead of just becoming more of the same. Thanks for watching, tell me what you think, and I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.